Would you believe it, guys? We're down to the last two Grand Prix of the 2025 F1 season. And it was destined to be a McLaren year. But there could be, in what we call in India, a kebab mein haddi, or someone to mess up the whole equation for McLaren. And that person, evidently, is Max Verstappen. That's what we're going to be talking about, along with a whole host of topics on this Qatar GP preview on the Inside Line F1 podcast. Good to have you guys here. My name is Somal Arora. I am the Hindi F1 commentator for Fan Code in India, and I'm also joined by a fellow Hindi F1 commentator, along with a person who also does the broadcast for Viaplay in Norway. Kunal Shah is here, former marketing head of Force India, racing driver himself. And the big question, Kunal, is can Max Verstappen do what Sebastian Vettel did all these years ago? Come back from roughly 25 or 24 point margin and in two race weekends go from all the way back to becoming a world champion.
Can he do it? I guess there's only one way to find out. Tune into the races in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. But that's a very sad answer that I just gave. I think I get a feeling with the momentum Max has with a 104-point deficit, which he's now overcome to be just 24 points away. There are more people who believe that he can do it, that he should be able to do it, that they will put a lot of pressure on McLaren. So for me, these two races are mainly about how McLaren and Lando Norris are able to handle that pressure called Max Verstappen. And yes, this isn't that invincible Red Bull we saw in Brazil, especially when there's a sprint and Grand Prix format. Red Bull is extremely on the edge of their decision making, right? We saw they got it wrong. But the only way for Max to do this is win the next three races, the sprint and the two Grand Prix, and then see whatever happens to McLaren at the very back. So I get a feeling there is a storm brewing in McLaren, mainly to do with those ride height issues, and we'll talk about that. But it's so difficult to make a choice, and I have a feeling Max is going to take it. Even though 3 days ago I thought Lando's going to seal it after Qatar, and just last night I still said Lando's going to seal it after Qatar.
And here we are, considering Max. It should not have happened, guys. 104 points is a huge margin to come back from. But that's what Max is doing. But we all want Max to complete the greatest championship comeback of all time. There is no doubt. If he does that, it will go down as the greatest. But Red Bull Racing have to overcome a recurring issue to make it happen. And that's what Kunal was referring to. Fridays. Because Fridays on a sprint weekend is where you have the biggest problems in correlating what you've learned in the simulator about the car's setup and what actually happens in real life. And that we saw in Brazil was such a huge issue. Verstappen only ended up finishing in P3 behind Kimi Antonelli and, of course, the eventual race winner, Lando Norris. And if I think about it that way, Kunal, Max Verstappen could well lose the World Championship this year because Red Bull Racing didn't quite have the best setup in Brazil. The margins are so close now. I mean, what if he wins the next three races or does something spectacular and still falls short? And maybe we look at Brazil and be like, that's the one race where they didn't get their setup right. And that is one big demon that Red Bull will have to overcome in Qatar, where they will only have, yet again, just one practice session.
I love how while you're talking of Red Bull, suddenly the lights in my room are dimming. So hopefully the sensors pick it up. But you know what, Somil? It's not just Red Bull that is going to be troubled by the sprint Grand Prix weekend. And I'm pretty positive about this, and I'm going to back it up with some data and situations that have been at play at McLaren in the last few races. So in Kota, when there was a sprint and both the cars were taken out of the sprint with a turn one incident, McLaren went very conservative with their ride height settings, right? We saw what happened in Brazil, that they were almost very, very marginal with their blank wear out there. So they went from being very conservative in Kota to being aggressive in Brazil, right? In Las Vegas, they went even more aggressive to the extent that they were found in breach of the technical regulations and eventually disqualified. So how does McLaren look at Qatar? Again, one free practice session. Do they go conservative to avoid a disqualification, or do they still keep being aggressive, knowing that 24 points is still a massive gap? in the Drivers' Championship. And how do they find that middle ground? And where is that middle ground? Is it a little more towards the conservative side? Is it a little more towards the aggressive side? And so on. And while I speak about this, the lights have gone off in the room. So I will move around when Samuel talks. But to me, the pressure is more on McLaren to get it right as much as it is on Red Bull. Typically, we've only spoken of Red Bull and their issues with the sprint. I think it's going to be McLaren under the challenge this weekend as well.
And they've got to be aware of the curbs. Because in Qatar, the curbs are a big issue as Kunal's light comes back again. Remember, this is the same circuit where in 2023 we were hearing stories about the curbs being so sharp that they were puncturing the tires. That was a legitimate issue. That's why they capped off the stint length. And they're also capping off the stint length this time out. But that's not because of the curbs, it's more down to tire wear. So, for context, guys, Qatar is going to be a mandatory two stop race. That's it. Let's just put it out there. The drivers will have to go through that. And that should change the equation a little bit, shouldn't it, Kunal? Because normally Qatar is full push. Now we're hoping because it's a two stop, there can be some differences, but I don't think there will be because everyone knows it's going to be a two stop. Might as well go all out, right? It's a circuit where there's no breathing space. And if you know that you already have to make two stops, it's all about how can you maximize the race space within it. And for some, the best option might be to take an undercut, get into free air, and put more qualifying laps, which might mean more drivers with strained necks and more drivers having heat issues because it's a hot, hot place. Remember, we're in the desert.
You're right. 2023 gave us the example that when drivers were pushing to the very limit, they were exhausted. 2023 Qatar Grand Prix is why the FIA came up with the cooling devices, the ACs that they want to attach to F1 car cockpits and the cooling vests and the mandated use of cooling vests. Could that come into play this time? There's a good chance that Qatar will see the FIA say, heat hazard, please use a cooling vest. And very interesting insight from most drivers. Some of them said the cooling vest was actually after a point of time circulating warm water, which I think is even worse than having cold water. And very interesting, some of the drivers who also love giving technical feedback on these things said the cooling vest was fine till you were cornering. Then the veins of water were actually hitting your ribs while you were cornering. So look out for those cooling vests. And we will keep updating you all on what exactly the drivers still keep saying because the cooling vest is still something new to the world of Formula One. But 2023, we had 18 laps mandated as the maximum stint length. 2025 is actually 25 laps mandated across. And this puts a lot of interesting engineering and strategic challenges, like you explained. The engineering challenges is going to be down to, understanding how you extract maximum performance. Do you continue to push and sort of gain track position? Because what happens, Soumya, let's assume you push and you decide I'm going to just chew my tires up. I won't go the maximum 25 laps of the stint length, but say I'll push for 18, 19 laps and pit early, like you spoke of the undercut. What if there's a safety car that comes out? So a lot of these luck-related factors will come into play. Do you continue to push so that you're at a faster pace than the others and have an extra stop? But in return, do you miss out on probably what could be a safety car scenario? Because when drivers are pushing in the heat and they are being physically challenged, could that lead to more mistakes as well, right? So that could be, again, one of those mistakes where, say, there's a safety car, a virtual safety car. Qatar has the third longest pit lane in the calendar, 26 seconds if you pit under the green, 15 and a half seconds if you pit under virtual safety car or the safety car. So it is a fairly long pit lane after Imola and Silverstone. But there is going to be a minimum of two stops. Would the teams have an incentive to go for the third is the question. And if everyone is mandated to a two stop, could pretty much be one of the most boring strategy races that could come our way. Because what did Kimi Antonelli do in Las Vegas? He pitted on the second lap and then he ran 48 laps on the hard. Now that or those kind of strategies will not be possible in Qatar this weekend.
Yeah, and I'm very interested to see how drivers drive this weekend. Because you know, Qatar is a place with a lot of fast corners. And the reason behind that is because Qatar is originally meant to be a MotoGP circuit. These are corners designed for bikes. And when you put the fastest race cars in the world on them with two extra wheels compared to MotoGP bikes, you end up finding out that even the slow speed corners are high speed ones. And as a result, drivers have to be constantly in a corner. There's barely any breathing space. The straight is only around 800 meters long and it goes past very quickly compared to the rest of the lap time. And so the tires are under continuous strain. And because they are fast corners, you'd stand to lose a lot more time if you lift off. So the game is, if you really want to conserve your tires, how quickly can you drive while trying to drive slowly? So how fast are you at 90%? Which will be phenomenal. It's a big driving challenge. And speaking of driving challenges, this is going to be a big driving challenge for Oscar Piastri. He is in desperate need of a comeback. He is in desperate need of some momentum on his side. The poor soul has been absolutely lost since Monza. But we couldn't have come to a better circuit, Kunal, for an Oscar Piastri comeback. Qatar, a place where he got a podium in his debut season, a place where he won a sprint race twice. One time handed over to him, the one time he won on merit in his debut year. Oscar has always been good in Qatar. If not here, then where will he perform?
I'm excited to see that because when you look at all the races where he's not done well at, whether it was Interlagos and Las Vegas and Kota and the likes and so on, and I know Interlagos was not really his mistake. Those are circuits he struggled at even last year and the year before that. But Qatar, he's been on the pace since his debut season in 2023. He and Lando have pretty much been there in or thereabouts. Now the question is, what can Oscar do to get himself back in contention? Because now the whole conversation, the chatter around the Drivers' Championship has moved on or moved beyond Oscar Piastri. It's become Lando versus Max. Oh, by the way, Oscar's also in it. And can he bounce back? Can he prove that he's still able to win races? Because this is the longest he's gone in the season without winning a race. And I'll put it this way, Samuel. Oscar Piastri, for the first time since Bahrain this year, doesn't have the best average qualifying position on the grid, right? Lando Norris overtook him after the pole position in Las Vegas. So Oscar has been now losing out on every metric that a driver would have liked to, be proud of. And if you look at the races after Sunfoot, so basically the races after, the summer break, Lando's been on a 2.6 average qualifying position, whereas Oscar has been on a 4.89 position. So that's as good as two times of what Lando has managed. Which brings me to the question: last year we saw last year we saw Max Verstappen win his fourth Drivers' Championship title in Qatar. Could it be that Lando Norris seals it this weekend? He's got to outscore Max and Oscar by 2 points, right? That's some of the math that's going on. But I'd love to see if the first chance that Lando gets, is he strong enough to lead himself and his team to go seal that title, Somil?
You've got such a good point, right? Because this could be the crowning moment of Lando Norris. This is Lando Norris's golden opportunity, his first match point, his first chance to cement his legacy as a world champion. And we might all think he's a shaky world champion. We all saw what happened in Las Vegas, how Max Verstappen got into his head very quickly. But people forget those things. People remember the final nail in the coffin, the winning moment, the day you sealed the world championship. How good are you on that day? Like in 2010, Sebastian Vettel wasn't perfect, but we all remember that drive in Abu Dhabi and how he was able to outclass everyone to become world champion for the first time. This is your chance, Lando Norris. Prove the doubters wrong. Prove how good you are. Make sure people remember you as a strong, a dominant, and a controlling world champion. And this is your first and best chance for that. He is probably going to become world champion. It's inevitable. It's now just a matter of how Lando Norris gets to the point of becoming world champion. And that, in my opinion, for the future and for the legacy, is equally as important as getting there.
Yes, and very lovely how you put it, Somil, that he is inevitably going to get there. How he gets there, because we saw in Las Vegas he had pole, but he got flustered by Max on the opening lap at the start itself. The previous races where he had flawless opening laps. There was one factor which wasn't bothering him on the front grid, which was the fact that Max Verstappen wasn't alongside him. Now, Max and Red Bull are repeat winners here in Qatar. They know how to go well around here. And we'll talk about the circuit in a bit, but I think Lando will, for his lifetime, fight off a big question. Was he the credible champion of the 2025 Formula One season? And why do we say this? We say this because Max Verstappen has been the driver of the season. Anyone you speak to will say Max is the driver of the season. All right. And where does Lando stack up? Has he convincingly been the best McLaren driver as well? I wouldn't say so. So, how he manages to seal the title will actually go a long way into cementing his position as a credible drivers' champion in 2025. And like we spoke a couple of weeks ago, this has happened before in Formula One. The best driver has not been in the best car and has not won the championship. So we still have to accept the result and history for what it will come. But I would say Lando had to deliver after his DNF in Sunfoot, and he has stepped up and delivered. And that brings a lot of credibility to him should he win this title in 2025.
Now, let's just put a question out there. What would need to happen to Lando Norris for Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri to have a chance? Silly answers only. No serious stuff. I'm thinking you need someone to do what Valtteri Bottas did in Hungary 2021 and wreck the field. Hope that he takes Lando out, and then maybe there's an opportunity for Max and Oscar. Or perhaps, like 2010, Lando Norris gets stuck behind an Alpine and cannot pass it for his life. And so the Red Bull racing car ends up becoming the world champion. Maybe. What else? What else do you think can happen, Kunal? What other silly things can go down?
I'll tell you the scenario of being stuck behind a slower car that actually happened to Oscar Piastri right in Las Vegas, right? And I mean, assuming that since he was chasing Antonelli so much, the Mercedes was a slightly slower car than the McLaren. So that possibility of being stuck behind a Ferrari or a Mercedes is ever so crucial for McLaren to make sure that doesn't happen, specifically with Lando, especially if Max is going to, put it on the front row and lead from the start itself. And let's put it this way. There is a possibility that McLaren, or for that matter, any driver could be stuck behind a slower car in Qatar and be able to do nothing about it. This is a circuit where track position is vital when it comes to qualifying. Track position is vital when it comes to race strategy, because overtaking is is almost impossible. Okay, there is one DRS zone. There are two opportunities, pretty much straightforward, turns 1 and 6. And if you're lucky and your stars align, maybe even into turn 4 and turn 12. So if Lando does get stuck behind someone else, and there are at least 4 to 6 cars he could get stuck behind, right? The swing in the Drivers' Championship on merit could be extremely high. And for once, I know you're not hoping for a Bottas Hungary situation from 2021, but there could be racing incidents where we saw Oscar, he was, P5 or whatever he was in Las Vegas, and he had a wheel-to-wheel touch with Liam Lawson at opening lap turn 1. So for a lot of reasons, McLaren and Lando Norris need to have a very, very clean weekend in Qatar.
But that wasn't a silly answer, Kunal. I said silly answers only.
Well, they have a slow pit stop. They've had a history of slow pit stops, especially when it gets hotter. That could be one of those things. But why rules happen? Imagine Oscar is ahead. Could McLaren prioritize Lando Norris in Qatar? Imagine that were to happen. And I'll put it this way. You said at the start of this episode that we've come all the way in the Drivers' Championship and McLaren couldn't settle it. I get this feeling if McLaren had prioritized Lando Norris in the first half of the season, maybe he would have been closer to sealing the Drivers' Championship title already, because he was the driver ahead, and then we all know what happened.
I want to put out a scenario for you guys. What if Max Verstappen is first, Oscar Piastri is second, and Lando Norris is third? And Lando is going considerably faster, but overtaking is turning out to be tough. And for Lando, if he's just able to get a real shot at Max and is able to beat him, he could be crowned world champion because all he needs to do, remember, is outscore him by 2 points. So imagine in that circumstance, it's evident Lando has better tires, more of an opportunity, just somehow, it just happens. Will McLaren pull the trigger and support Lando to say, right, we don't want this to continue till Abu Dhabi. We don't want any volatility there. We don't want any hint of a chance for Max there. We want Lando to go and close this right here, right now. Do you think McLaren will pull the trigger and ask Oscar to swap positions? Because I don't think they will. I think they'd much rather lose the championship than have their driver confirmed and seal it.
I have a feeling that they will do it. They will ask Lando to and Oscar to swap position.
But
What they will
that's
tell
just
Oscar, they will sell the carrot to Oscar. They'll say, Oscar, remember, there will be more chances to win world championship. You will need your teammate in the future to win the world championship. They will convince Oscar. Oscar will crumble on the radio and then give up track position to Lando Norris. That
what
is
if he
my reading.
doesn't? What if he doesn't? I want to see that.
I
That's the
hope he
drama we're
doesn't.
looking for.
I really hope he doesn't, but I get a feeling there is a lot more going on in the papaya garages with papaya rules. Like we spoke of, we still don't know why Oscar Piastri retweeted and then deleted that retweet of Bernie Ecclestone's quote. And maybe that's going to come out if there is a book some point of time later in the year when, Oscar will just be like, that was complete BS. I should have just not done that. Maybe it's in his contract. So let's see. I would love for McLaren to be challenged on the pit wall and for Oscar to make it tougher for them to make these silly papaya rules decisions, I would say.
Yeah, it's what we call a face turn in pro wrestling when someone's like a villain and then they suddenly do what the fans have been waiting for forever, and then they go from a heel, which is a villain, to becoming a face, which is the hero. Come on, Oscar, it's your time to do a face turn. Defy the rules. Say no. Fight. We need this. And if not now, then when? Honestly, let let me rephrase that thought. I'm getting so pumped up right now. Never let anyone tell you that you will get chances to win world championships because that is a whole heap of rubbish. You don't. It's you don't. World championship opportunities only come by once or twice in your life. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you create those chances to be there at a good team for 5 or 6 years. But not everyone gets to be there in that sliding door window. Ask Felipe Massa about it. He got one chance. It didn't work out. Did he get a chance ever again? Imagine if that year he was like, "Oh, I'm going to give a position to Kimi because that's what the team." Nah, can't do that, Oscar. You can't do that.
I'm eager to see which way it goes, and I'd love for Oscar Piastri to stand up for himself now that it's equal points with him and Max Verstappen, and both of them have equal opportunities to win it or lose it. And when I say equal, I mean mathematically, of course. I get the feeling that Lando's on his way to becoming the champion, and it would be a shame if they were to now prioritize Lando instead of keeping papaya rules and keeping it consistent. And I know we spoke about this, but I would love for scenarios which we saw in 2016 where one driver is ahead and slowing down and bunching the pack up, saying, I need to win this race. I need to, I've actually, spoken to some of the drivers, and they've always said that, this whole thing about beat your teammate, and the lights have gone off again. It'll come on when I keep some hand movements. But what happens is you have your team boss telling you, Somil, you got to go beat Kunal. And here's how we're going to do it. And then the same person goes and says, Kunal, you've got to beat Somil. Now, in this, there is a human exchange that's happening. There is a lot of selfish egos. There are lots of, lots of other factors at play. And I think you can't be on the same team at that time. There have been instances in the past, where we've seen a lot of friction in this regard. So I'm wanting to see if McLaren also has that sort of a fallout in Qatar. It's not that I'm wishing for it, but they want papaya rules and they want to deal with all the mess. Then why not? So that's going to be up at front. It's a beautiful circuit. I love it, lit under the lights, very fast, flowy, smooth, very grippy as well. So that's going to be something to look out for. I think the cars will be able to run much lower, but key question is how much lower can McLaren run, Somil?
Yeah, and will the curbs puncture tires? Will the drivers sustain the heat? And my pro tip for all of you: watch qualifying with no commentary. Trust me. If you can, watch it with no commentary. Or if you really want to know what I'm talking about, watch Lewis Hamilton's onboard lap from 2021 here for pole position. You will be amazed at how fast this place is. But before we close this episode, time for two things: predictions and two drivers to watch for. Let's go for two drivers to watch for. First, my driver number one is Oscar Piastri. He's under a lot of pressure. He's delivered well here. It's his circuit. Now is the time we need the real Oscar Piastri to come back. So this is the weekend where he should come back. That's driver number one. Driver number two for me is going to be Oliver Behrman. And I'll tell you why. Haas are in a fight. Haas are in a fight for P7 with Aston Martin and Sauber, and there's barely a couple of points in it between all of them. 5 points between P7 and P9, and there's $17 million to play for. Oliver Behrman, with his performances and a good qualifying at a circuit that's tough to overtake at, could well earn Haas those $17 million if he does well. Those are my two drivers. Which ones are they for you, Kunal?
I would say Max Verstappen. When I was speaking to someone this morning and they said McLaren have left traces of blood after the double disqualification in Las Vegas, and the lion called Max Verstappen is now coming hunting. And Max in this hunter mode is such a beautiful sight to watch. So I'm wanting to go and see him hunt down the papayas, right? So that's number one. I think the other driver I'd really love to see is Gabriel Bortoleto. He's had a very strange run of races in Brazil and Las Vegas. Lots of rookie errors, something we didn't see in the first 20 odd races of the season. How does he bounce back? Because, Sauber believes that this circuit will suit their car, much as Racing Bulls believe that this circuit will suit their car as well. They're saying medium to high speed circuits, medium to high speed corners actually suit us. So, that is where I'm going to go. So one experienced driver in Max Verstappen, and then his Brazilian friend Gabriel Bortoleto. And where do you think Mercedes could land up? Because I get this feeling Mercedes, George Russell, Kimi Antonelli, even more so, will have a say in the McLaren versus the Red Bull Racing drivers fight. Where do you think they'll stand up?
George has been good in Qatar traditionally. George has been really good in Qatar. Okay, let's just make this the prediction. Three questions for predictions. Number one, who takes the sprint win? Who takes the race win? And finally, importantly, which one of the Mercedes drivers is ahead? And also, last question, four, will Lando become world champion here or not? Let's start with that. Lando for world champion here, yes or no?
No, I don't think so. I think it's going all the way down to Abu Dhabi.
I think so too. I think Max is going to stretch it. Oscar's going to have a tough weekend. Yeah, that's my prediction. Let us know down yours. Oh, okay. Mercedes drivers. Kimi or George? Who's going to win the head-to-head this weekend overall? I think it's going to be George.
I have a feeling it's going to be George as well. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if George even snucks in between Max and the McLaren drivers.
That'll be lovely. That'll be lovely. Okay, so who's winning the sprint race, Kunal, finally?
I think it's Max.
I think it's Max too. And the race?
Also, I think it's Max Verstappen.
Guys, we're so biased right here at the Inside Line F1 podcast. We're so biased because we just want the best driver to do the best things. And that's why I'm also going to say Max as well. But you can let us know your predictions down in the comments on YouTube. And if you're, of course, watching the Instagram shorts over there as well, on the YouTube shorts as well. Yeah, it's a good place for us to interact. Make sure you follow at Inside Line F1 Pod on Instagram and YouTube. Lots of content will be coming your way all throughout. And Kunal and I will firstly be on the Hindi F1 broadcast this weekend on Fan Code, so make sure you tune into that. And also back on the Inside Line F1 podcast for the post-race review, so make sure you tune into that too. Should be a good one. All right then, guys. Thank